ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं शरवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति भूरिदा जनाः. Your words are like nectar and bring life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone. I don't think that I've been here for the class in a few weeks. I've been traveling a little bit. So, the last time we had the class, we were on the chapter with the devotees of Dakshineswar Part 2, and this is page 337. And if I remember correctly, this is the long stay that M had over the Christmas vacation with Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineswar, the longest period that he stayed with them straight through, except for Kashipur. And even that was going back and forth. So Sri Ramakrishna is talking to, there was a teacher who came. This is Friday, December 14th, 1883. It's about the third page. Master to the teacher. What is wrong with image worship? Now, we don't know who this teacher was, but possibly he was from the Brahmo Samaj or one of the Western educated devotees who had this very negative image about image worship. So Sri Ramakrishna said to the teacher, what is wrong with image worship? The Vedanta says that Brahman manifests itself where there is existence, light, and love. Therefore, nothing exists but Brahman. How long do small girls play with their dolls? As long as they are not married and do not live with their husbands. After marriage, they put the dolls away in a box. What further need is there of worshiping the image after the vision of God? Now, we have two ways of understanding this worship with the image or with the symbol. One as a very preliminary type of religious or spiritual practice that we transcend ultimately. But when we look at the life of the devotee, Sri Ramakrishna and other devotees, they never really give it up through a whole lifetime. They go beyond it, but don't discard it. So we see with Sri Ramakrishna that after having the highest realization, Brahmajnana and everything, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that he'll still go with tremendous reverence and bow down before the temple, because he's not just that he sees God everywhere, but there's something special. He mentioned earlier, the Brahman manifests itself in everywhere. Well, that's okay. So we can bow down before anything. But there is a special power that comes when any sacred symbol is worshipped by many people. We feel that. It may be psychological, it may be some real vibration, it may be some awakening. We talk about the awakening of the deity, whatever it is, that those who have that devotional attitude, it's not that they'll start out with the image worship and they'll get to the point where they'll say, no, I've gone beyond that. That's for children. Even though they may say it's the first step. And we have to go beyond it from the point of view of seeing God not simply in the image, but seeing God within ourselves. So we have these two different attitudes. You know, in the temple of Rameshwaram, if you've ever been there, you'll see on both sides of the main gate, there's a quote from Swamiji's reply to the address that was given to him when he first came back from the West. And he talks about worshiping Shiva in the lingam as preliminary worship, and the highest worship is seeing Shiva dwelling within all beings. Now, this is true, but Swamiji will go with great reverence into the temple itself and prostrate himself. So it's not that we go beyond it and then just discard it. That those who feel some special reverence for any aspect of God, that the symbol will also be holy for them. So it's a complicated issue that we want to go beyond mere image worship, but at the same time, to not look down upon it as an inferior type of worship. Swami Vivekananda once said, how can I say that worship of the image is a lower form of spiritual practice when Sri Ramakrishna himself had the highest realization to that type of worship? So he's talking to this teacher, and he's trying to show that, okay, that it's like playing with dolls, and once we have the real experience of God, we don't care for the image, but still, it will have some special place in the heart of the devotee, that form of God, even image of God, that is worshipped at the very beginning. I mentioned earlier, yeah.
Just like the girl may still preserve the dolls.
She may still keep her dolls, yeah, but now she has the real thing. I mentioned last week or last time a statement that the Swami Bhuteshananji made. He said, okay, so suppose we say that image worship is the lowest rung on the ladder. And since it's the lowest rung on the ladder, that I won't bother with it. He said, then we'll never set foot on the ladder. We have to start at some point. Either we have some good samskaras and we don't need that, but to not take the help of concrete, tangible symbols is to make it that much more difficult for us in spiritual life. So we pay equal reverence to the image as we do to what is signified by the image, just as the name of God and God himself. Somehow the symbol also is something very, very sacred. We bow down before we have a marble statue of Sri Ramakrishna in our shrine. We bow down before that with great reverence. We know it's not Sri Ramakrishna. We know that it's made of marble, that this is inanimate, solid stone. We may say that it's also Brahman, but that's not our vision. We do it because we feel that it's kind of oneness. Holy Mother used to say that seeing the image and seeing the actual person are the same. This Chaya and Kaya, she would say. So even the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, she felt was on some level as sacred as Sri Ramakrishna himself, that he dwelled in his image picture somehow. Holy Mother, after the death of Sri Ramakrishna, would sometimes take Thakur's picture, especially I think when she went to Puri, because he never went there, and she would show him. She would take the Thakur's picture as if he could see, put it in front of the image so he could also see. I traveled with one young Swami one time. He's a little bit crazy, but very nice. He did the same thing. We went to Chitrakoot. Chitrakoot, there's a place you do this circumambulation. You walk through the whole thing. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of temples. Each one he would take out his picture, Thakur, yeah, and show it to them. Huh? Thakur's picture, yeah, or maybe Holy Mother also. I don't remember both of them. Yeah. So, what further need is there of worshiping the image after the vision of God? He's telling this to that teacher. It's true. There's no need, but there's a joy in it. We don't have to discard it. That's the point. Yeah.
Humorous.
Okay, but you have to come here because they can't hear you. No. Tell us. Come on. Or I'll relate it. You can tell me and I'll relate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a Swami who visited Mayavati.
There was a Swami who visited Mayavati.
Whenever I asked, after dinner, we used to
after
take a little stroll.
After dinner, they would, this is our Swami Bhaswadanandaji. They would stroll together after dinner in Mayavati.
Every time I asked him, he would say just 2 minutes.
Every time you would ask, what would you ask him?
Irritated me. Yeah, every day I have to call you, and you will say 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, okay. So they would go for a walk together, but every day when he would call to say, "Let's go for a walk," he'd say, "Give me 2 minutes."
And go to his room, close the door.
Go to his room and close the door.
Yeah, after weeks time, I started wondering what it was.
So okay, so our Swami was wondering, what does he do in these 2 minutes?
Only one day he left the.
One day he left the door cracked open a little bit so he could see through.
Time, he was offering. He liked strolling
Yeah.
with a bidi in his mouth.
So okay, so he was a bidi smoker. So
he used to.
he would offer bidi to Sri Ramakrishna. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is an idea that we should offer to the deity what we think the deity would like, and generally, if we like it, we think he'll like it.
But for him, the image was real.
And the image was real, of course. Yeah. So this, yeah. I mean, this was really Holy Mother's attitude also. Yeah. So we have that teaching as well. So we shouldn't take this too seriously when Thakur says, "What further need is there of worshiping the image after the vision of God?" There's no need. There's no need of anything after that. We can say, what is the need of showing love and compassion to other people? There's no need, but the heart likes to do it. So Thakur never gave it up. His whole lifetime, with a few exceptions, when he was doing his Islamic sadhana or Advaita sadhana, then he wouldn't care so much. But otherwise, we find in our order that even the greatest jnanis will show tremendous reverence to the image of Sri Ramakrishna. We have our one exception, Bharat Maharaj. And even Bharat Maharaj, not that he didn't have reverence, but he wasn't one to go in and bow down and do all the ritualistic types of things. But otherwise, we don't find any big.
Yeah, but still he did stay in Belur Math.
Yeah, he stayed in Belur Math, of course. He had his own type of devotion. So we don't find any conflict between the highest knowledge and showing reverence to these symbols which become sacred for us. You remember the story about Swamiji, and he was having that conversation about image worship. It was we talked about it with the Dewan of Mangal Singh, and it was in somewhere in Gujarat, Rajasthan, and he was arguing against image worship. Why worship? Even M at the very beginning, you remember, huh? Just why worship an image made of stone? Yeah. So, Marinmoy, or Thakur, no, it's Chinmoy. But anyhow, what Swamiji did was he said, see the picture of the Maharaja on the wall. You take it down from the wall, and he took it down. He said, "Okay, now spit on it." He said, "How can I do that?" He said, "But it's not the Maharaja; it's just his picture." But still, we have to show reverence to it. So he said it's the same thing with this image worship. Nobody is worshiping clay and stone and things like that. We worship the divinity. See, this is the curious thing that's not understood very well outside of the Hindu tradition. Concept of God is so high, and the symbols are so concrete and tangible. There's such a big gap in between that people don't realize that those who are bowing down to the temple may have the highest conception God dwells within their hearts as pure consciousness in the higher self, and still bow down in the temple. There's no contradiction really, if we have that understanding. Okay, now Sri Ramakrishna is talking to the teacher, but we have to remember M is here the whole time, and this is the most important period in M's training. We can say that these 2 or 3 weeks that he's with him, so he'll get a lot of teachings from Sri Ramakrishna. So the master glanced at M and said, "One attains God when one feels yearning for him. An intense restlessness is needed. Through it, the whole mind goes to God." Okay, this is one of the themes that runs through all of the teachings we find in the gospel, is vyakulata. Vyakulata, we find this mentioned in the Narada Bhakti Sutra as well. It's an intense yearning and intense longing and intense agony and anguish of heart also. These two go together. It's Thakur gives so many illustrations, pushing the head underwater, that intense longing for a breath of air. We can't live for, if we don't get a breath of air, we won't live for another moment. That type of longing for God. Now, this is the very final stage in spiritual life, but the curious thing is that some of us feel that at the very beginning of spiritual life. That tremendous longing, especially I think monastic life, this is what leads us to renounce everything. And if it becomes intense enough and we have God realization, good. Otherwise, what happens? You can't maintain that for a whole lifetime. It becomes a little subtle. It goes a little bit deep beneath the surface, so that we're not constantly crying and rolling on the ground and everything. It's not possible for an ordinary person, but it remains. Once we get that tremendous longing for God, it remains and sustains us. And then we hope at the very end it'll come back like that. But we find with many people, they'll ask that question: why is it that that tremendous longing for God realization that we felt at the very beginning, that we don't feel like we have it anymore after some years? And this is really the test, that we have to go ahead with our spiritual practice with that same intensity and devotion, even if there are some dry periods, because spiritual life has ups and downs. There are dry periods. You know, if you ever read about the life of Mother Teresa, she had really one very strong vision where Christ told her to start her own order and everything. And after that dryness, her whole life, spiritual dryness, very painful for her. And some people take this as a sign that she really wasn't as saintly as she was made out to be. But those who really have a higher understanding of this dark night of the soul and St. John of the Cross and all of that, for them, it shows the real saintliness of her, how she lived with that burning fire within her heart of this viraha bhava, of feeling of that separation. This is also a sign of a great soul. So the vyakulata, how do we get it? This is the thing. Either we have some type of grace, that something happens in our life, some tragedy happens, we meet some great souls, something happens, something awakens within us, we have that tremendous longing, or we put in the hard work. We do our sadhana. There's no shortcut. The Thakur says in these board games where your piece has to go through, he says there's no, go straight to go and collect $200 like in Monopoly. You have to go through each space. So there are no shortcuts. So we have to just be very regular in our spiritual life, and slowly that devotion grows, and that longing will become even greater, we hope. A man had a daughter who became a widow when she was very young. She had never known her husband. She noticed the husbands of other girls and said one day to her father, "Where's my husband?" The father replied, "Govinda is your husband." A little bit like the story of Mirabai. Right? "He will come to you if you call him." At these words, the girl went to her room, closed the door, and cried to Govinda, saying, "Oh, Govinda, come to me. Show yourself to me. Why don't you come?" God could not resist the girl's piteous cry and appeared before her. Now, what do we do if we have a piteous cry and God doesn't come? What do we do? This is a very curious conversation between Narendra Swamiji and M at the end, where Swamiji says, "I'm thinking of going on a fast, that I won't take any food till I realize God." So M says, "Very good." And then Swamiji says, and Narendra says, "Well, what if I get too hungry before I realize what?" He says, "Take some food and start again." So we can't pretend with this vyakulata. When Sri Ramakrishna, did he decide that he won't be able to sleep for all those years and take food and that he'll be weeping and wailing? And he didn't decide that he was swept away. This vyakulata, it's something like Shraddha, how Shraddha entered into Nachiketa. This vyakulata will enter into. I'm not speaking from personal experience, but we see that. We see that in the lives of these great souls, how it will enter into them, and they won't be able to live. They won't be able to think of anything but God. And when it reaches that point, then of course, the realization has to come as a result of that. There was somebody, I don't know who it was, he wrote some articles and things about Thakur teaching a new path called Vyakulata Yoga. That this is another path. It's not through knowledge, it's not through devotion, it's not through anything, it's through this intense longing and yearning for God. And Thakur used to say that all of our spiritual practices are meant to bring about this Vyakulata. See, the Jnani will say all of our spiritual practices are meant to purify the heart and sharpen the mind. We'll get all different ways of understanding it. Thakur says that this is the final catalyst. This is the one thing that will lead us to God realization, this tremendous longing for God. But it's got to be sincere. We can't pretend. We can pretend with this aropa. Huh? We can try to take on that attitude, try to feel how Thakur felt when he was calling on Mother. It's not pretending in a hypocritical way. It's trying to feel, to imagine. See, we meditate on Sri Ramakrishna. Yeah? We have so many ways of doing it. One way is to try to feel how Thakur felt during his period of sadhana. If we imagine that tremendous yearning, agony of soul for God, then we're experiencing it. We're imagining how he had it. We're experiencing it, not the way he did, of course, but to a certain extent. This is one way of practicing that type of meditation. One must have childlike faith and the intense yearning that a child feels to see its mother. The yearning is like the red sky in the east at dawn. After such a sky, the sun must rise. Immediately after that yearning, one sees God. This is a very nice example that we're doing spiritual practice and we're in that period of darkness. It's the middle of the night for us. And we have no idea if it's 10 o'clock at night or if it's 4 o'clock in the morning. We have no idea how long it'll be, but we have no choice. We go ahead with our spiritual practice. Now, it could be years, it could be lifetimes. We don't know. We don't give it up. But if we see that little pink glow in the horizon, then we know that there's no question that the sun is rising. There's no question that nighttime is over. And how long does it take? 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour. It doesn't take long after this. Is Thakur's point. That when we have that experience, that tremendous, sincere longing for God, then God realization is right around the corner, we can say. It won't be a long wait after that. He says immediately after that yearning, one sees God. Let me tell you the story of a boy named Jatila. He used to walk to school through the woods, and the journey frightened him. One day he told his mother of his fear. She replied, "Why should you be afraid? Call on Madhusudana," the name of Krishna. Mother asked the boy, "Who is Madhusudana?" The mother said, "He is your elder brother, Dada Madhusudana." One day after this, when the boy again felt afraid in the woods, he cried out, "Oh, brother Madhusudana." But there was no response. He began to weep aloud. "Where are you, brother Madhusudana? Come to me, I am afraid." Then God could no longer stay away. He appeared before the boy and said, "Here I am. Why are you frightened?" And so saying, he took the boy out of the woods and showed him the way to school. When he took leave of the boy, God said, I will come whenever you call me. Do not be afraid. One must have this faith of a child, this yearning. Now, how does it work? This is a very dualistic, devotional way of understanding it. God sees that yearning of our heart and appears before us. The uh, Jnani will explain it that it's that yearning itself which brings about God realization. We don't have to explain it in terms of God looking down and seeing that and revealing himself and coming that way. That itself is enough. It's the same thing with prayer. That prayer, when we pray for devotion, intense prayer for devotion, is that not enough to bring devotion? Does it have to be that God hears it and grants us devotion? That prayer itself brings it about. So the vyakulata, another way of looking at it, of course, so from more of a non-dualistic point of view, that tremendous longing itself will cleanse the heart. It'll bring the mind to a higher level. That itself will take us to God realization. So just different ways of understanding it. A Brahmin used to worship his family deity daily with food offerings. One day he had to go away on business. As he was about to leave the house, he said to his young son, give the offering to the deity today. See that God is fed. The boy offered food in the shrine, but the image remained silent on the altar. It would neither talk nor eat. The boy waited a long time, but still the image did not move. But the boy firmly believed that God would come down from his throne, sit on the floor, and partake of the food. Again and again he prayed to the deity, saying, O Lord, come down and eat the food. It is already very late. I cannot sit here any longer. But the image did not utter a word. The boy burst into tears and cried, O Lord, my father asked me to feed you. Why won't you come down? Why won't you eat from my hands? The boy wept for some time with a longing soul. At last the deity, smiling, came down from the altar and sat before the meal and ate it. After feeding the deity, the boy came out of the shrine room. His relatives said, the worship is over, now bring away the offering. Yes, said the boy, the worship is over, but God has eaten everything. How was that? Asked the relatives. The boy replied innocently, why, God has eaten the food. They entered the shrine and were speechless with wonder to see that the deity had really eaten every bit of the offering. Yeah. Now, do we believe this? Huh? Raise your hand if you believe it. We can't imagine this. This is the problem. How do we picture it? Do we picture the image itself coming down, God coming out of the image? Do we? These are all we can take these in any way that we want to take them. If we're too intellectual and too modern people, that we can't imagine these things happening, and we appreciate the fact that what Thakur is trying to show, that God will reveal himself when we have that tremendous longing. That's enough. You remember that other story that Shyam Sundar, when he takes the form of the horseman and comes out and defeats an entire army. Yeah? And then Thakur asks them, do you believe all of this? And M says, oh, I believe it's possible that they saw him that way, this and that. And then Thakur laughs and says, these stories are a little one-sided. It's the little fanatical devotion. So even Thakur sometimes wouldn't emphasize too much taking these things in a very literal way.
But also in Thakur's own life, Thakur once said to Mother, if all my realizations are true, then let this stone.
Oh, so many, of course, miraculous things happen in Thakur's life. Yeah, there's one time he said he wanted a sign from the Divine Mother. If my realizations are true, let this rock jump off the ground. So it jumped off the ground, or he saw it jump off the ground, or she made it happen. God knows. God knows. But it was an indication from him, even if the Divine Mother makes him think that it jumps off the ground, that's the Divine Mother giving an indication to him that it's true. We we can drive ourselves crazy if we really try to rationally explain all the experiences that these mystics have. They're really beyond our ability to understand these things. Late in the afternoon, and the other thing is that Holy Mother saw Sri Ramakrishna partake of the offering every day, but he left it for us to eat. He didn't, he didn't actually come down and eat the whole thing. He would somehow take the essence and put back, and so it would turn it into prasad that way. The light would come out of the eyes from the picture. She would see it that way. No one else would see it. She would see it. Late in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna was talking to M. They were standing on the south side of the Nahabad. Since it was winter, the master was wrapped in his woolen shawl. Master, where will you sleep? In the hut? In the Panchavati? M, won't they let me have the room on the upper floor of the Nahabad? M selected the Nahabad because he had a poetic temperament. From there he could see the sky, the Ganges, the moonlight, and the flowers in the garden. Master, Holy Mother must have been in Jaidambati at this time. And Thakur's own mother used to live up there. This is after she passed away. Oh, they'll let you have it, but I suggested the Panchavati because so much contemplation and meditation have been practiced there, and the name of God has been chanted there so often. There's a footnote. During the period of his sadhana, Sri Ramakrishna practiced spiritual discipline in the hut in the Panchavati. And this is where he had his Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and stayed for those 6 months. Now notice that Sri Ramakrishna is not forcing him. He's saying, he's suggesting it. He's going to let him come to his own conclusion. In the evening, incense was burning in the master's room. He was sitting on the small couch, absorbed in meditation. M was sitting on the floor with Rakhal, Latu, and Ramlal. The master said to M, the sum and substance of the whole thing is to cultivate devotion for God and love Him. Now, M was a highly rational person, highly intelligent, and we know that he studied Western philosophy and history and literature and logic even, and perhaps it was a little too cerebral. You know, Sri Ramakrishna, he had two different techniques. One was if somebody had a particular bent of mind, spiritual attitude, he would encourage him that way. And the other was if it was a little bit too strong, he would have some counter teaching to balance him out a little bit. So we find with Vaishnavas that very often that he would be very encouraging with regard to their devotion and everything, but he would scold them a little bit about being too one-sided. So some things are correctives that he does. This is one of those things with the M. It's not that he wanted M to discard any type of higher understanding or anything, but he wanted to develop this devotional attitude in M. So the master said to him, the sum and substance of the whole thing is to cultivate devotion for God and love Him. At Sri Ramakrishna's request, Ramlal sang a few songs, the master himself singing the first line of each. Ramlal had a nice voice, and Thakur often asked him to sing, but the one who really liked to have him around was Swami Brahmananda. And Swami Brahmananda always liked to have people around him who could sing. So some of his sevaks were very good singers and everything. So they had a very close friendship. And the Ramlal, he was a bit of a character. Sometimes he would dress in a sari.
Ramlal couldn't sing before.
What's that?
Ramlal Dada couldn't sing before.
Oh.
Sri Ramakrishna, who blessed him, he wanted, Sri Ramakrishna thought it would be nice if Ramlal could sing.
Oh.
Then he could hear the songs
from
him.
So
he wrote on his tongue.
Oh.
And after that,
where did you read that?
Sing.
I never saw that. Where did you read
I
that?
don't know where I read it.
Did you ever
but I
hear
read
that?
it. I'm sure I read it.
Oh, anyhow, maybe Punti. I don't know.
Maybe one of Chaitanya and Krishna's books.
Maybe. Anyhow.
I don't know.
But there's a story. I don't remember the whole thing, but I just to show this close relationship. There was a brahmachari who was told it was Thakur's birthday celebration, and he was given the duty. He said, "Don't let anybody take food up to the shrine area and eat up there." So he obeyed and everything. Then there's one young girl and then some other member of the family came, and he told them that there's no eating upstairs, that you can keep the food down here. And later, Swami Ramananda called him into his room and said, "You have to leave. You have to leave the order." And he had no idea what it was or anything. It was Ramlal's family members.
Lucky Didi.
She saved him. Yeah, it was no, it wasn't her. It was Ramlal's family members and everything. So he didn't know what to do, and he went to Dakshineswar and Sri Ramakrishna's niece, Lakshmi Didi, who was Ramlal's daughter. She explained the whole thing, and so anyhow, it turned out that he had to really apologize to them, and I think cook some food, something like that. And finally, he got back in the good graces of Swami Brahmana. That was how close that relationship was, and Thakur's own relative. So somehow insulting Thakur's relative, insulting him, and it sounded too strong. But anyhow, that was so. The Ramlal, he did good things, he did bad things. He stopped Holy Mother's money, and so all of the family members of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, uh, they were there to thicken the plot, to bring some interest to this Leela. They weren't all great souls, and Holy Mother's brothers especially. They were just troublemakers and everything. But we couldn't appreciate Holy Mother's forbearance and calmness and everything if it hadn't been for what she had to put up with in her family. So everything helps with this Leela. Ramlal sang, "Oh, what a vision I beheld in Kesha Bharati's hut. Gora in all his matchless grace, shedding tears in 1,000 streams, like a mad elephant. He dances in ecstasy and sings, drunk with an overwhelming love." These songs are so highly beloved to the devotees in Bengal, especially. This all this Nimai Sannyasa, this whole uh, play that's put on with all the different songs about how Chaitanya Deva, a young man of 24, how he left in the middle of the night and went to Keshav Bharati's hut and took sannyas, and how his mother wept so much. And very sad. The mother lost all of her children. The only other child who was still living had renounced the world. He was the only one left. And how to go to his mother and say that he was also leaving the world, renouncing the world. So people hear these stories, you see them shedding tears and everything. It was really very touching. We had it performed here once. Anybody remember? Long time ago. Mandira. She did it in the community center, the very, very beginning. She did it one time. The very beautiful songs. Then he sang, "Though I am never loath to grant salvation," these are the words of Sri Krishna, "I hesitate indeed to grant pure love." See, Thakur's in this mood now. These are all the Vaishnava songs, and with the highest type of ecstatic love. These are not any high Vedantic ideals, and not even Divine Mother. These will all be this ecstatic love of Chaitanya Deva and Radha and Krishna and everything. Yeah, Thakur, the relationship between Thakur and Chaitanya Deva is really interesting, because in the beginning he didn't know much about him and didn't have much reverence for him. He came from a family, the Vaishnava family, but not from this that school of in Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Chaitanya school. It wasn't until he went to Navadvip and had those experiences, and then when the Brahmani came also, and then when he started to feel that this Chaitanya Deva was so similar to him in so many ways that they were almost the same person, and then that conviction came. Not just he was Rama and he was Krishna, but Chaitanya Deva. He joined the club at that point. Thakur really felt that he was every bit as much of an avatar. Though I'm never loath to grant salvation, Sri Krishna saying, I hesitate indeed to grant pure love. Whoever wins pure love surpasses all. He's adored by men. He triumphs over the three worlds. Sri Ramakrishna said to Ramlal, sing that one, Gaur and Nitai. This is Chaitanya Deva and Nityananda. Gauranga and Nityananda. Gaur and Nitai, ye blessed brothers. Ramlal began the song and the master joined him. Gaur and Nitai, ye blessed brothers, I have heard how kind you are, and therefore I have come to you. When I visited Benares, Shiva, Lord of Kashi, told me of the Parabrahman's birth as man in Mother Shachi's home. That was the name Chaitanya Dev's mother. O Brahman, thee I recognize. Many a sadhu have I seen, but never one so kind as you. Once in Braja, you were born as Kanai and Balai. So this Chaitanya Deva and Nityananda are held to be this incarnations of Kanai means Krishna and Balai means Balaram. Now, once more in Nodia, Navadvip, as Gaur and Nitai do you appear, hiding the shapes that then you wore. In Braja's pastures running freely, once you frolicked, now for play you roll on the ground in Nodia, chanting aloud Lord Hari's name. Laughing, shouting, once you played at Braja. Braja is near Vrindavan, with your cowherd friends, and now you chant Lord Hari's name. O Gaur, how cleverly you hide the dark blue form you wore at Braja. This is a constant theme that Krishna had a dark complexion, Gauranga. That means he had a golden complexion. And how is it that Krishna himself, with a dark complexion, was born as Gauranga with a golden complexion? There are so many songs about that. And they have this idea that Sri Krishna had a longing to experience the devotion that Radha had for him. It's a very interesting idea that Radha had for him. Because when we look at this devotional play between Sri Krishna and Radha, Radha is greater. She's the ideal, not Krishna. He's great because of his Gita and his conversation with Uddhava and other things. But in terms of devotion, Radha is the ideal of this Madhur Bhava. And this is why Sri Ramakrishna had to feel himself as Radha, had to feel himself as a handmaid of God in order to experience that. So the idea is that he was born as outside, that he was, he had Gaura, that outside he was golden complexion of Radha, Anta Krishna. But inside, in reality, he was Krishna himself, experiencing that same devotion. So this is why, really, we say Chaitanya Deva is an incarnation of Krishna, but really, in some sense, he's an incarnation of Radha, because he experienced all of the devotional moods and attitudes, the rasas and bhavas that Radha had, and that Sri Ramakrishna experienced also, the three of them. It's not Krishna, Chaitanya Deva, and Ramakrishna. It's Radha, Chaitanya Deva, and Sri Ramakrishna. When it comes to this highly emotional, all the physical transformations and everything. These are all the things that the Brahmani saw in Sri Ramakrishna, and she recognized him, his divinity, because she compared it to what we see in Radha, in the scriptures written about her, and Chaitanya Deva. So, O Gaur, how cleverly you hide the dark blue form you wore at Raja, but your slanting eyes betray you. Through the blessing of your name, the sinner is set free, they say. And so my soul is filled with hope. Now, with eager heart, I hasten to your feet. Lord, I implore you, keep me safe within their shadow. You redeemed Jagai and Madhai. These were two ruffians in the town of Nodia that would terrorize people. They would go and beat them and everything, and they even was it either Nityananda or Chaitanya? They threw some broken jar and it cut them and everything, and still they blessed them and embraced them and everything, and they became great saintly people, followers of them. You redeemed Jagai, that means Jagadat, and Madhai, wretched sinners though they were. I pray you do the same for me. I've heard that you embrace all men as brothers, even the outcast, whispering in the ears of all, Lord Hari's life-renewing name. One thing about this Chaitanya movement, it created a tremendous literature. And before that time, there was no tradition of, there was always a tradition of biography. And we can say the Bhagavata Purana and that. But the type of this Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavata and everything, this created a new type of Bengali literature and all of the songs that were created. There's hundreds and hundreds of songs came out of that period. So that in itself was a tremendous contribution to the culture of Bengal and India, but most of these things were being in Bengali. And tremendous amount of philosophical Sanskrit literature and philosophical devotional literature in Sanskrit also by the Goswamis. See, Chaitanya Devi, he sent, there were 6 Goswamis, actually 5, and then Jiva was the nephew of Rupa and Sanatan. He sent them to Vrindavan to build up the city again and to make the temples, to find, recreate the ancient Vrindavan, and to write all of that literature. Tremendous amount of highly philosophical literature also. Late at night, M sat alone in the Nahabad. The sky, the river, the garden, the steeples of the temples, the trees, and the Panchavati were flooded with moonlight. Deep silence reigned everywhere, broken only by the melodious murmuring of the Ganges. M was meditating on Sri Ramakrishna. At 3 o'clock in the morning, M left his seat. Now, think how many hours he's sitting there in meditation. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. He proceeded toward the Panchavati as Sri Ramakrishna had suggested. He did not care for the Nahabad anymore and resolved to stay in the hut in the Panchavati. This was Thakur's wish for him. Suddenly he heard a distant sound, as if someone were wailing piteously, "Oh, where art thou, brother Madhusudana?" And now we know this was Latu. It's not written here, but at least this is the assumption that's made. The light of the full moon streamed through the thick foliage of the Panchavati, and as he proceeded, he saw at a distance one of the master's disciples sitting alone in the grove, crying helplessly, "Oh, where art thou, brother Madhusudana?" Silently M watched him. Now we remember who was present when Thakur told that story. It was Rakhal and Latu and Ramlal. Anyhow, Latu was staying with him at that time. So, okay, that's the end of that day. Now, it is Saturday, December 15th, 1883. M had been staying at Dakshineswar with Sri Ramakrishna, so it's December 15th. I should know this, how many days he stayed with them. Anyhow, this is the very next day. The last one was December 14th. But I think he'll stay through Christmas at least. This is the Christmas holidays at that time. The master was sitting in his room, listening to the life of Prahlada, which Ramlal was reading from the Bhaktamala. M was sitting on the floor. Rakhal, Latu, and Harish were also in the room. But Rakhal was probably staying with Sri Ramakrishna at this time, Latu and Rakhal. He stayed off and on during different periods with him. Who else stayed at that time? Babu Ram came a little later, maybe. Swami Premananda. And different devotees would stay there at different times. And was sitting on the floor. Rakhal, Latu, and Harish were also in the room, and Hazra was on the veranda. While listening to the story of Prahlada's love for God, Sri Ramakrishna went into an ecstatic mood. Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons and father of Prahlada, had put his son to endless torture to divert the boy's mind from the love of God. But through divine grace, all the king's attempts to kill Prahlada were ineffective. At last, God appeared, assuming the form of Nrisingha, the man lion, and killed Hiranyakashipu. There's some story that no one could kill him, who was either no man or no animal, so it had to be half man, half animal. And he had to be hidden in a pillar. There's some three things that happened. Anybody know? You remember? Huh?
It's a detailed story.
A detailed story. Okay. Not necessary then. The gods were frightened at the rage and roaring of the man lion, and thought that the destruction of the world was imminent. They sent Prahlada to pacify the deity. The boy sang a hymn to him in words of love, and the man lion, moved by affection, licked Prahlada's body. Still in an ecstatic mood, the master said, this is Dasavatar. We go from Matsya in water till we get a little bit kurma, water and out of water, and then we get to the animal kingdom, and we have to get to the humans, but we have to have the half man, half animal in between. It mirrors the whole evolutionary process. It's very interesting. Still in an ecstatic mood, the master said, what love for the devotee. The master went into deep samadhi. He sat there motionless. A teardrop could be seen at the corner of each of his eyes. The master came down to the plane of the sense world and spoke to M. The master was in an ecstasy of love. I skipped a portion there, don't mind. Was in an ecstasy of love. He began to dance around the room and sing. Who was singing Hari's name upon the sacred Ganges bank? Is it Nitai that has come, the giver of heavenly love? It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Ramlal had finished the daily worship in the Kali temple. The master went to the temple, accompanied by him. Entering the shrine, the master sat before the image. He offered a flower or two at the feet of the Divine Mother. Then he put a flower on his own head and began to meditate. He sang a song to the Divine Mother. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he could just slide from one to the other, everything about Sri Krishna and Chaitanya Deva and Hari, everything. And then he goes to the temple of the Divine Mother, everything Divine Mother. Didn't make any difference. We find sometimes it's Kali Puja night, they're singing about Chaitanya Deva, or vice versa, that he could just go, he was really the chameleon, the Bahurupi. And he could just be, this Udipana could happen, or at any moment, any time, any aspect of God could become fully awakened within him. He sang a song to the Divine Mother. Thy name I have heard, O consort of Shiva, is the destroyer of our fear. And so in thee I cast my burden. Save me, O kindly Mother. Sri Ramakrishna returned from the Kali temple and sat on the southeast veranda of his room. He ate some refreshments which had been offered at the temple, and the devotees also received a share. Rakhal sat by the master and read about Lord Erskine from Self-Help by Smiles. I don't know who this is, some English writer. Who is it? Samuel Smiles. Who was he? There's some.
He is known only by that.
Only by this. It's only, okay. Master to M. What does the book say? M. It says that Lord Erskine performed his duty without desiring any result for himself. Disinterested duty. Was he in India, Lord Erskine? Erskine is.
But I probably have seen that book. It contains
Oh.
many his inspirational
Stories. Master, that is very good, but the characteristic of a man of perfect knowledge is that he doesn't keep a single book with him. Okay, that takes care of us. He carries all his knowledge on the tip of his tongue. There's the instance of Shukadeva. Books, I mean the scriptures, contain a mixture of sand and sugar. Now, this is why I say that Thakur was the sanest person. He had a type of sanity that we don't find anywhere else. There's this a belief that the scriptures, and when we say scriptures, we mean Shruti mostly, that there can't be a single word in Shruti that is not essential and that it can be false. And there's so many rules and things. There can't be a single statement that is a tautology, that is just a repetition of another state. Everything has to be something different. It has to have a beginning and a middle and a conclusion. There are all these different rules, and the commentators, all the acharyas, they have to show that there's a consistency. They can't have two different views. And if Shruti says it's got to be right. And now Thakur says, no, it's a mixture of sugar and sand. Now, where do we find that sanity? So that we have to understand that some things do have a little bit of during a certain cultural period, they made sense. Some things are not appropriate for us. Some things are maybe based on the understanding at that time. Everybody else will bend over backwards to try to show that everything makes perfect sense. It doesn't always make perfect sense. Huh? And Thakur is so intelligent. He'll say, then leave it alone. This is one of the grains of sand. It's not sugar. You don't have to bother about that. I'm so impressed when I read that. I was so impressed that because normally we'll find that Shruti is Shruti. It's the word of God. There can't be anything in it that's not 100% right. But Thakur, he was practical, a very practical person. Huh? Books, I mean the scriptures, contain a mixture of sand and sugar. The sadhu takes the sugar, leaving aside the sand. He takes only the essence. Now, there'll be things that are little stories and everything that we don't have to say are false or anything, but they may not be of that great value for us. We have to pick and choose what things are, not to say they're full of mistakes, but there'll be things that won't be so relevant for us. Vaishnav Charan, the musician, there were two Vaishnav Charans. That one was very close, almost companion of Thakur, and considered to be some type of leader of his community, the Gospara groups and everything. And then the Vaishnav Charan was a Kirtaniya. He was one of the singers who sang very often. And he was also a very good person. Thakur liked him very much. The Vaishnav Charan, the musician, arrived and sang a few devotional songs. M spent the night in the Nahabad. So he's back in the Nahabad. What happened? He went to the hut. He went back again. Anyhow, we'll see. Okay, that's the end of that day. Now we're up to Sunday, December 16th. So this, we're getting day after day after day here. So we'll stop here on page 342. I thought he spent the whole time in the hut. I forgot. He went back to the Nahabad. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanugam Bhaturavikramai Ishavataram Bharanishamidyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasanamama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for the devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.